21st Sunday in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the book of Joshua. Joshua gathered together all the tribes of Israel at Shechem, summoning their elders, their leaders, their judges, and their officers. When they stood in ranks before God, Joshua addressed all the people. If it does not please you to serve the Lord, decide today whom you will serve, the gods your fathers served beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose country you are now dwelling. As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. But the people answered, Far be it from us to forsake the Lord for the service of other gods. For it was the Lord our God who brought us and our fathers up out of the land of Egypt, out of a state of slavery. He performed those great miracles before our very eyes, and protected us along our entire journey and among the peoples through whom we passed. Therefore, we also will serve the Lord, for He is our God. The word of the Lord.
His praise shall be ever in my mouth. Let my soul glory in the Lord. The lowly will hear me and be glad. Taste and see the goodness of the Lord. The Lord has eyes for the just, and ears for their cry. The Lord confronts the evildoers, to destroy remembrance of them from the earth. Taste and see the goodness of the Lord. When the just cry out, the Lord hears them, and from all their distress He rescues them. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and those who are crushed in spirit He saves. Taste and see the goodness of the Lord. Many are the troubles of the just one, but out of them all the Lord delivers him. He watches over all his bones, not one of them shall be broken. Taste and see the goodness of the Lord.
A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Ephesians. Brothers and sisters, live in love as Christ loved us. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and handed himself over for her to sanctify her, cleansing her by the bath of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. So also husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one hates his own flesh, but rather nourishes and cherishes it, even as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak in reference to Christ and the Church. The word of the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Many of Jesus' disciples who were listening said, "This saying is hard. Who can accept it?" Since Jesus knew that his disciples were murmuring about this, he said to them, "Does this shock you? What if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? It is the Spirit that gives life, while the flesh is of no avail. The words I have spoken to you are spirit and life, but there are some of you who do not believe." Jesus knew from the beginning the ones who would not believe and the one who would betray him. And he said, "For this reason I have told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted him by my Father." As a result of this, many of his disciples returned to their former way of life and no longer accompanied him. Jesus then said to the 12, "Do you also want to leave?" Simon Peter answered him, "Master, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and are convinced that you are the Holy One of God." The Gospel of the Lord.
The first reading comes from Joshua 24, 1-2a, 15-17, and 18b. The people have entered into the promised land under the leadership of Joshua, and Joshua decrees that they should renew the covenant that they had made with God at Mount Sinai. The reason for the renewal is that now that God has fulfilled the promises that he made, that they would enter the land flowing with milk and honey, Joshua wants to make sure that God is their God. Remember, when the Israelites left Egypt, when they escaped from their slavery, many others who don't seem to have been Israelites accompanied them. Now the people have to make a choice. Either they will serve God or they will serve the gods of the Amorites. The people choose to serve God because God has manifested his power. He has shown his greatness through their escape from their slavery in Egypt. The second reading is from Ephesians 5, 21-32. This is called the house tableau. These are rules, household rules, in order to understand what living the good life meant. Paul and his followers at times showed Stoic tendencies. And in this case, we see the tendency that there should be good order in a family, that the wife should be subordinate to the husband is the head of the family, the children should be subordinate to their parents, etc. Now, the one thing that we see is that it's a little bit different than what the Stoics would have said. Here it speaks about the husband also loving the wife, that there are mutual obligations in these relationships. It's not simply blind obedience, but it's a mutual responsibility one towards the other. Now, if this passage were written today, we might very well phrase it differently. Remember, this is simply saying that we should live an ordered lifestyle. And what was an ordered lifestyle in the days of this author? It was that the husband be in charge of the family, the wife be subordinate to him. Was that the revelation, that the husband should be the head of the family? Or was the revelation that there should be an ordered lifestyle? And that's a good question to ask. We might consider an ordered lifestyle a bit different than what they did. One thing that's very interesting is at the end of the passage, it speaks about marriage between a man and a woman being a parallel to the marriage between Christ and the church. That's a very positive image for marriage. And this is one of the reasons why we don't believe that Paul did write this letter, the letter to the Ephesians. Because remember, in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, he speaks about marriage in a grudging way. You shouldn't be married, the end of the world is at hand, you should stay celibate, but if you have to, if you're going to commit a mortal sin, then I guess it's okay to get married. I can just picture that as a homily at some wedding. It's a shame you have to get married, but I guess it's better than going to hell. That's certainly not the image presented in this letter, which speaks about the beautiful covenant between a man and a woman and the beautiful covenant between Christ and the church. The Gospel is from John 6:60 to 69. This is the end of the Bread of Life discourse. Jesus has said that the people have to eat his flesh, drink his blood, and some of the people are shocked and they just can't accept this, so they go away. So Jesus turns to his disciples and says, "What about you?" What does Peter respond? "Master, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life." This is one of the few times in John's Gospel where Peter is given a good showing, where he appears to be a man of faith. Remember, this is very similar to the idea that we saw in that first reading, that the people decide that they're going to hold on to God and make a covenant with their God, renew the covenant that had been made at Mount Sinai. Now, the verse that doesn't get included in the passage today immediately follows this. And what does Jesus say to Peter's proclamation of faith? "Yeah, but one of you is going to betray me." Even though this is the high point of Peter's portrait in this gospel, the author of this gospel just couldn't let it lie. He had to put a little bit of a dig in. Because remember, this gospel very much emphasizes the role of the beloved disciple as the example of what a disciple of Christ should be. And Peter, although he is a good Christian, nevertheless falls a little bit short because he's not in love with God as the beloved disciple is. And may God bless us.